Okay, good morning, everyone. We made it through another day. My name is Marisol Jimenez, and I am so excited to welcome you to this webinar being offered through the Coping with Corona Collective. This series is an emerging response from our community as we all try to understand what this global pandemic means for us, for our loved ones, and for our movement efforts in ways that we are still trying to understand and are still revealing themselves to us. Every day, it seems that we're hearing not only about the public health impacts of the coronavirus in our already broken healthcare system, but also the devastating economic impacts on families who were already struggling to get by before this global pandemic. There are so many questions about how our elected officials in Western North Carolina and the North Carolina General Assembly are responding to all of this. And so this morning, I am so grateful to have this conversation with North Carolina State Representative Graig Meyer, who represents the 50th District, Asheville City Council candidates Nicole Townsend and Roney. And today they're going to offer us some updates and answers in this constantly changing situation, map out for us the different political pressure points that we should be targeting, and outline some actions that we can all take to move the state toward more equitable action. So I'm very, very grateful to be able to introduce today Representative Graig Meyer, who I have known for a very long time as a William C. Friday Fellow, as a fellow co-conspirator in the immigrant justice movement, as the founder of the Blue Ribbon Mentor Advocate Program in the Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools, and who now serves as the North Carolina House of Representatives since 2013. He's in District 50. He serves constituents in Orange and Caswell County. Graig is a social worker who has spent his career working in public schools and advancing racial equity in those environments. Roney is a piano teacher. She's a service industry worker and so understands what a lot of this struggle is feeling like on the ground. And she's also a community radio producer. She's an advocate who walks, bikes, and rides the bus in Asheville, and she is also currently running for Asheville City Council. She's a longtime people's advocate. I've seen Kim in movement spaces ever since I've been here in Asheville, and really respect her willingness to throw down and stand in solidarity with the people. And then last, but certainly not least, is Nicole Townsend. Nicole Townsend is just a really dear friend of mine. She's a community organizer and Asheville City Council candidate as well. She is unapologetically Black and queer and has spent the last 10 years organizing around issues such as cash bail, police accountability, LGBTQ rights, environmental justice, and municipality budget transparency. I'm always proud to stand next to Nicole when she calls us out into the streets, and I will always be proud to do so. I'm so grateful to have you all here with me today. And now we'll turn it over to you. Thank you so much. Oh, one more thing for all of you who are joining in this call, if you'll do us the favor of please muting your mics. I'll be running the chat, so if you have questions, comments, anything that you'd like to share, please drop that in the chat and I'll call on you as we are able to have moments for some discussion. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Marisol, for hosting us, and not only for this webinar, but for the series. I'm really looking forward to the opportunity to skill share as someone who is not behind the scenes, but just trying to compile information with and for my neighbors. Obviously, it's important for us to share links and access. So I think another big follow-up to this will be for folks to be able to go and watch the meetings and look at the timing of the meetings and what exactly is being said, and for us to keep bringing more ideas to the table on ways that we can throw down together.
Nicole, do you want to add anything? Just saying good morning. All right. Well, I'm Graig Meyer. I'm glad to be with y'all. Happy to answer any questions you have about state response, anything from small business assistance to what's going on with schools. If you're willing to put questions into the chat box or raise your hand, I'd be happy to answer anything.
All right, so Are we going to go ahead and get into some of the questions that we know are big questions and then make time at the end?
That'd be great.
All right, so one of the questions that we're hearing a lot, especially after yesterday's press conference, Buncombe County is holding press conferences every day at noon, and those are available on Government Channel 192 and streaming on the Buncombe County Facebook as well as their website. We have links to that. On Tuesday, Buncombe County announced a draft of shelter in place. So that's the question is, will there be shelter in place in Buncombe County and a curfew? And if so, what will it mean? So Buncombe County is moving to a model similar to what the state of New York is implementing. Quote, more details will come out Wednesday and Thursday. So you have a link to the video on our slide here, and we can also make that available afterwards. The potential shelter in place exemptions, they're saying will be similar to the New York City ones. So I pulled them from the New York Times. It lists grocers. Oh, and this is to say that like these are the ones will be exempt. So we're meant to all stay in our homes or where our shelter is for these things. Grocers, restaurants offering takeout or delivery, convenience stores, liquor stores, hardware stores. There's a whole list there. It does include child care providers. So this is a list of the things the New York Times has said are exempt in New York City. So if our draft in Buncombe County is similar, this is something we could expect. The details on the potential curfew and enforcement are not yet available. We do know that violations may be cited as a misdemeanor. And one thing that I know, because I know Sunrise is on this call as well and has made a list of demands, we know that Sheriff Quentin Miller does not have a 287G agreement with ICE. So it is important for us to ensure that we don't have a 287G agreement with ICE and that we can stand and support that we not hold ICE detainees. And there's also many of us calling for the release of nonviolent detainees, and we understand that dozens of the detainees just in Buncombe County, so folks who have been arrested, are being released. So that's in process, and there's more information coming about that. Nicole and Greg, do y'all have anything to add to that?
I'll add that I think that you're going to see a lot of the major counties in the state go into stay-in-place orders over the course of this week. We know that Mecklenburg County issued the order yesterday to begin on Thursday. Durham County is issuing one this morning, and I think the other triangle counties will be close behind Durham. So I think I would expect that Buncombe will be in line with most of the other major metropolitan counties in the state on that. And there's, I think there would be a lot of consistency across the state on what businesses are exempt. And there's also a process for if you want your business to be considered exempt and it's not already on the list. And I will grab the link for that and then copy that into the chat box if anybody wants to use that for your own business or a business that you know.
Yeah, and a little bit later on the call, we'll get into some details about the other Western North Carolina counties that have already issued shelter in place and are closing their borders to visitors.
Great. Okay, I think we can go ahead and move to the next slide. We will have contact information coming up on how you can contact city, county, and state representatives. All right, so one of the other questions we're seeing are, what are the city and county doing to provide relief for people with low or no income? So last night I watched the city council meeting. There's the link to where you can watch the video on the city's YouTube page. At this week's city council meeting, the council agreed to join the municipalities that are joining efforts in the One Buncombe Fund. Now, the presentation was made by Sam Powers, who's Asheville's Community and Economic Development Director. That presentation starts at about 20 minutes into the recording. The One Buncombe Fund is a partnership with the Asheville City, the Buncombe County, other municipalities in Buncombe County, Land of Sky, and the Chamber of Commerce. It is organized as a relief giving center. is meant to provide relief for people and locally owned businesses defined as 50 or fewer employees. So this is being run through Buncombe County and as evidently part of a organization that's able to accept nonprofit donation or tax exemption donations. So they will be supporting individuals with a loss of employment. That includes life essential needs like mortgages and overnight lodging and utilities. It's expected that application process for individuals will open as soon as this week. Health and Human Services through Buncombe County is going to screen candidates to see if rent and mortgage expenses can be covered from another funding source first, and then relief funds will be distributed to program providers on the applicant's behalf, not for the person directly applying for the relief. So, for example, if you're looking for relief for rent, that might go to a nonprofit like Pisgah Legal to distribute, not for you to pay your landlord directly. For, I know there's been a lot of questions around renters because that wasn't named explicitly, but in the recording of the meeting, you'll see that city staff is suggesting that rent could be covered the same way that mortgages are covered. It would still be paid to the property owner. So for small businesses with less than 50 employees, relief will be managed by Mountain BizWorks. The definition of fewer than 50 employees is much smaller than the national definition, and they will have limited funds. So these uses could be for payroll, fixed debts, and any other bills that you're not able to pay. Low interest loans with no interest as a bridge fund will mean that like 6 months of deferment of payments may be possible. Is meant to be like a gap fund with additional disaster relief funding expected. They are looking at a 5.5% interest rate. A lot of folks have been asking for a 0% interest rate, but legal is currently reviewing right now because the rates are right now understood to needing to be near the market rates. Because this is considered an economic development fund, it will require a public hearing. And so the public hearing is going to take place on April 14th. Now, we all know that we're not allowed to go give public comment in person. So the city council is opening up public comment to be made digitally with the following guidelines. 1, any public comment must be sent by 5 p.m. the day before the meeting. So the deadline for public comment for this would be April 13th. There is a Google form we have linked for you. You can also call the city at 828-259-5900. That's area code 828-259.
Watch people watching a meeting, it's so creepy.
And I know a lot of folks are asking that the language be more than 350 words. Right now, our public comment has a 350 word limit. So there's requests to extend the word limit to 450 words or at least allow an audio recording. Watching the meeting, I realized that staff was trying to transcribe folks' phone calls and maybe not getting the language across. So I think for me, being able to hear a phone recording of or a digital recording might be helpful. So public comment was cut off for this city council's meeting at 5 p.m. on Monday, but the One Buncombe report didn't come out until Tuesday. So I know there's a lot of concerns for the funds to support renters, gig workers, and contractors. So that could be a call to action for us for the city and the county moving forward. Greg and Nicole, do y'all have anything to add to that?
Nope.
Okay.
Hey y'all, thank you for taking the time out this morning to be on this call with us. Once again, I'm Nicole Townsend, and I just want to be very transparent about the fact that I'm not privy to any information that the general public is not privy to. So I just want to make that clear that just because I'm a candidate does not mean that I know information that you all do not know. During this time, I'm not privileged to any backdoor conversations. And so I just wanted to name that and let you all know that I may not have the answers to all of your questions because we're still waiting on a lot of information to be put out. So right now, I just wanted to name that we currently do have counties in Western North Carolina that are closing their borders to visitors. People who live in these territories and counties can leave and go as they see fit, but we cannot go there. And the reason I think it's important to name this is so that folks can be aware to check on your friends who live in these counties. And also just be mindful that if for some reason you decide to take a drive or you're like, I'm trying to go out to somewhere rural just to like get away from all of this, you will be turned away at this point if you go to these places. So right now that includes the Koala Boundary, which is the territory held by the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians. This territory sits in Cherokee County, Eastern Swain County, Northern Jackson County, and it also is a part of a couple unincorporated communities, Marble, and I'm probably going to say this wrong, but Hiwassee. This also includes the snowbird community of Graham County. Graham County has also made the decision to close its borders to people who don't live there. The towns that are in Graham County include Robbinsville, Fontana Dam, and there's also another town that I can't pronounce, but I will make sure that it is in the information for you all. There's also a few small townships, and so I'm pushing folks to just like do a little research if you have to drive through Cherokee County or Graham County, and if you know people who may live in those areas, please check on them because as I said, visitors cannot go in and out. And I'm assuming that throughout the week, more counties in Western North Carolina are going to follow suit and do the same thing. So one of the other things that has been coming up is questions around libraries. I know that public libraries are places where a lot of our people go to get the resources that they need. So far, the information that I have found regarding our public libraries are that no overdue fines will be charged. So if you have any books or you have anything that you need to return, please know that our libraries are suspending those overdue fines. There is a virtual library that has access to a plethora of information. What I'm finding is that some of this information has to be accessed by using a library card. I'm not sure if that's going to change in the coming weeks because we're not sure how long our libraries will be closed. So if you don't have a library card and you need to access some of the resources in the virtual library, put some feelers out for folks who may have a library card. And I am still waiting on confirmation around internet connection. I know some of our libraries have made the decision to keep their internet operating so folks can stand outside of the library and use internet. This is also a service that folks would need a library card for. And so I would say folks who are dependent upon the library for essential services, I would say continue to check the Buncombe County website. Buncombe County is kind of is where our libraries fit under as far as government. So the libraries fall under the county, not the city. There is a virtual library. Please check it out during this time, as many of us are in our homes. And we can put out some feelers for those of you who may not have a library card and want to access some of that information. And so really the last thing that has transpired in my circle with folks that I've been talking to has been this conversation that kind of started yesterday around the city of Asheville. just going to read in the chat. You can get a library card by email. If you look in the chat, Amy has linked that website. We can make sure we have that resource for y'all. Thanks, Amy. So something that has transpired in the last 24 hours, and I myself am still learning about, but last night our city council voted so that our mayor can make decisions without a full council vote regarding COVID-19. And so really unpacking what that means. So there is a North Carolina General Statute Ordinance that will also be linked for you all to read through. It's 166A-19.31. And essentially what that allows us to do is it allows our mayor to move forward without a council vote on things like imposing a curfew, directly and compelling the voluntary or mandatory evacuation of all or part of the population that may be impacted by an issue. It allows us to make decisions around closing roads, dictating transportation. It also allows us to, sorry y'all, it also allows us to take actions against the possession, transportation, sale, purchase, and consumption of alcoholic beverages. This also is the same thing as gasoline. So it allows our mayor to make decisions around transportation, sale, purchase, and storage of gasoline, and also firearms. So essentially, should we need to close our borders? Should we need to make a decision around closing streets and neighborhoods or evacuating people from neighborhoods? Our mayor can make that call without a council vote. And also something I want to point out is folks can use their own discretion on whether or not they want to follow any guidelines that a city official puts out. And I want to name that in this general statute, it also notes that should our mayor take action and propose something and put something in place, if we do not follow it, that will be a Class 2 misdemeanor. As I said, everyone can use their own discretion, but I want to let us know that should this not happen, someone could be arrested and charged with a Class 2 misdemeanor. And what that means, as I'm looking it up, 1 to 60 days of active, intermediate, or community punishment. Well, what exactly does that mean? That means that you can have a fine of up to $1,000. You can also face jail time. And so just wanted to name that because I know during these times we have to take care of one another. And we don't know what is going to happen in the next few days. And so just wanted to let people know what the risks were should folks choose not to follow the direction of our mayor. And I also want people to use the discretion that they need to use in order to take care of their people. There's still more information coming out as far as if the mayor will announce anything today. I'm making the assumption that either today or tomorrow she will come out and say something. There's a reason as to why they voted the way that they did last night. And I would say the City of Asheville website and social media has been doing a pretty good job with updating us. And so if you are on social media, I would say make sure that you are following the Buncombe County social media pages as well as the City of Asheville pages. They're also working hard to make sure that their websites provide information on the home screen. Those are the three things that have been coming my way in the past few days.
Great. Mari, if you want to bring up the next slide. I wanted to share a little bit about economic resources from multiple levels. Talk about small businesses first. I didn't create a slide about unemployment, but I'll talk about that after I run through this slide. And there are, of course, lots of businesses that are hurting right now. And small businesses do have support that's available both from the private sector and the state and federal levels. Yesterday, the Golden Leaf Foundation and the North Carolina Rural Center announced rapid recovery loans of up to $50,000 for all businesses, all small businesses in North Carolina. Any business that has at least one employee, including a self-employed owner, is eligible, and you only have to have been open prior to March 23rd, which was yesterday. So you, pretty much every business, small business in the state would be eligible for this. It is a $50,000 6-month no interest loan. It's designed to be a bridge loan until small business assistance loans from the federal government can kick in and help folks. So if you have a small business that needs emergency cash right now, that's probably your best option. At the state level, through the Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina, we have a program called Business Link NC that's designed to connect businesses with resources that can support them. And the link there takes you to the direct website with all of their resources for small businesses in this time. Or it's the one place where I think you can have easy access to talk to someone. So you might want to try that 800 number if you have questions that you want answered. And then, of course, the federal government will provide the vast majority of assistance to businesses that need help, and that they already have a disaster loan portal set up, and the federal government has already passed some disaster loan assistance money, so you can go ahead and begin applying there. I don't know how long it's going to take to process those SBA loans, but that's why the rapid recovery loan system was set up, so that you can have a bridge loan until the federal government assistance is able to come in. If you're an individual looking for financial assistance, the best help right now is through the North Carolina Unemployment Insurance Program. We know that over 150,000 people have already applied for unemployment insurance since the coronavirus outbreak has started in North Carolina. The system was crashing during the first couple of days, but I think it's been stabilized and has, I know a lot of people have been able to apply over the last couple of days. So hopefully folks are able to go to the unemployment insurance website and apply and get access. We think that checks will begin being sent within 2 weeks to folks. And then of course, the federal government is working on a direct economic relief package that the Senate is supposedly going to vote on today. There's lots in the media about that today if you're interested in what's in that program. If you've got questions about any of this, feel free to post them in the comments. So let's go to the next slide. I'll talk briefly about this and we'll see if anybody else wants to add in. If you do have questions or requests of your government, here's ways to contact folks at the city, county, and state level. I love that you all put the North Carolina megaphone in here. It makes it really easy to contact all legislators. Although you may have more luck contacting your individual legislator directly and trying to talk to them. I think legislators are really engaged right now. But there's a lot of things, because this is so unprecedented, there are a lot of things that are happening that we don't know about until someone from the community contacts them about it. I'm talking to constituents probably for 2 or 3 hours a day about individual needs, and then communicating those with folks who can help them settle those issues. Sometimes we can address those at the state, but sometimes it has to be done at the city or county level. One good example of that is that the feeding programs for North Carolina's children while they're out of school are being coordinated almost entirely by counties and local school districts. So people have been contacting me about those, and I've been passing them on to the local officials that can help them with those programs. Kim, you're on mute, I think, so you might want to unmute yourself. I see you trying to talk.
Oh, thanks. I want to just remind folks, as Nicole said, too, that we are currently members of the public. So I think that as we think about what we can do for specific calls to action, I think for myself, contacting the county when there is going to be a shelter in place, what does that mean for our neighbors who are unhoused or on the streets? I know that there are communities across the country that are securing hotel rooms for our unhoused neighbors. For me, it means asking that Sheriff Miller continue to not have a 287G agreement with ICE and to support the release of nonviolent prisoners. For the city, it means asking that public comment be available immediately. So at last night's meeting, there were hundreds of public comments made that weren't heard, and they won't be available until the minutes come out. And because of the timeline, that means we won't see the public comment for 3 weeks. So if there's a way to extend public comment to 3 minutes, if there's a way to extend the word limit or to have recordings, and then also to make the public comment available immediately so we can see what folks are saying and what folks are asking. And then for the One Buncombe Fund, this means contacting the city and the county and to ensure support for renters, gig workers, and contractors. Right now, the governance of that group has 7 members, and they also have a technical committee. They are currently seeking a representative in philanthropy and one from a minority-owned business owner. But what I didn't see was a seat designated for a renter or someone seeking shelter, and also employee representation. So those are the kinds of letters I'm going to be sending to my city and county as we consider what's coming next. Of course, we know that as I currently have the internet, I have a lot more access than some of my neighbors who don't have the internet. I know that Charter is making available internet for families with school-age children at no cost, including the setup fee at no cost, but that still doesn't include everyone. So I recognize a lot of privilege in that. I currently have shelter and I currently have the internet, but we will need more ways to make sure that our neighbors who don't have those privileges are also being cared for. So just a thank you for everyone who's organizing around the mutual aid arm of this as we get more information to our neighbors about what can be done at the city and the county and in the region across the state.
Maybe we can unmute everybody and see if people have questions. There aren't any questions in the chat box right now. Meyer just asked me something that'll take me a minute, but I'm going to unmute everybody quickly. And if you have a question, everybody should have just been unmuted. If you have a question that you want to ask, go ahead and introduce yourself.
I have a couple questions. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing this information. My name is Alex and I'm with Sunrise Asheville. I was wondering if Esther, in her newfound powers, has the power to like distribute funds.
I didn't read anything specifically about distributing funds, but I do know some of what I was reading was that there has been talked about the city doing so. I know the county is kind of, for a long time, been leading on a lot of financial distribution to community. And I will say it wouldn't surprise me if we see some kind of budget amendment to distribute funding directly to folks in Asheville. And so while I don't think this would be something that Esther herself would mandate, I think council as a whole will probably move forward in that direction soon. So I think something will be coming out soon.
And I will note that because that would require the entire council getting together, one of the things I noticed in the city council meeting last night is that Councilman Keith Young did bring up that there are bond funds set aside for the land bank at $100,000. So they may, or he has asked the council to consider if those funds could be used for relief. Other funds may be available for use for relief, but with the mayor's new authority, she wouldn't have to wait for the entire council to come together to make those kinds of decisions.
Okay, gotcha.
And I know that it's also a consideration that Buncombe County may have similar authorities. I haven't seen that confirmed yet, but we can certainly send those questions and ask if the county chair also has similar authority to distribute funds without having to gather the entire commission.
Okay, cool. And then in regards to like pressuring our local government to make sure that unhoused people are sheltered. Where would you suggest putting that pressure? You think like majority on the county or county and city?
For me, I'm putting that pressure on the county and the city. I know that we are a Dillon's Rule state, so I'm currently looking to see if there are other cities that are having some sort of mandate around that. But we also know that Buncombe County collects our hotel occupancy funds. So I've been sending it to the city and the county, understanding the county may have more leverage.
And do they have any plans right now? Is there like anything in the works for supporting?
Not to my knowledge, not this public.
Okay. Thank you.
I think what you're likely going to see is a cascade of responses that the federal stuff goes into place and then the state goes into place and then locals kind of supplement around that. There probably will be some things that locals will try and do in the short run to bridge some of that, but I mean, your local budget just isn't as big compared to what's available from the other levels.
I will say that, yes, when we're talking about offering shelter to folks who currently don't have shelter, yes, pressuring the county and the city. And I also think that there can be some pressuring on individual hoteliers and folks who own property. And so for me, it's, we need the county and the city to make a mandate, and we need our neighbors in our communities who are owning these properties to also say, hey, we actually don't have any visitors sleeping in these rooms right now, so we can allow our folks to come off the streets.
One of the things that we can also ask for while we're contacting our city and county representatives is, what is the plan if and or when the hospital reaches capacity? So that is one of the things that we're seeing come in on another way for questions to come in. In other words, I'm just getting a text about this. So,
do other people have anything else you want to ask?
Hi, this is Jason Krekel, he, her, he and him, and Amy. Pertaining to the stay-at-home order, I was just curious how it affect, as far as do they enforce it on people outside of their homes, just going for walks? Do they enforce it on group gatherings? Are they, how would that pertain to someone, say, just going for a walk with their partner?
All of the ones that I've seen do have the ability for folks to take walks as long as they're not gathering in large groups and they're using appropriate social distancing. And I think I've even seen a couple that have specific language about taking walks with animals. So I think there's a lot of latitude for people to be walking. The goal is to avoid people from having too much contact with others. I think there's going to be much more attention paid to people who are in their cars than who are walking. But I don't really think anybody has any good idea of how local law enforcement are going to enforce this. I doubt they're going to be setting up checkpoints, at least not yet. But it's not clear when or how or why they would stop folks to enforce this, because we just haven't ever had a situation like this.
So I just want to name that right now the Asheville Police Department has protections for consented search for people in their cars, but not for pedestrians and cyclists. So it's going to be really important for us to watch this moving forward. We do not know any information about what a curfew would look like, what enforcement will look like. We do know that the court system is closed for things like trespassing, but everything is up in the air right now. So it's really important for us to pay attention to what happens Wednesday and Thursday, coming from the Buncombe County press releases. Once again, that starts at noon.
Has there been any discussion about opportunities regarding all those monies at Dogwood? What kinds of advocacy there might be, what kind of access to staff and board, given I would hope the sensibilities around all the things that are going on at Mission that pool of funds. What should we be doing around that?
Does anyone else want to answer this? Because
I haven't been made aware of a specific way in which Dogwood is going to be, and just for clarity, y'all, it's Dogwood Health Trust, not the organization. So Dogwood Health Trust, I haven't heard a specific direction in which they're going to take around this. However, that is something that's been crossing people's minds, and that is something that has been crossing people's minds. And I think, oh, thanks, Amy. They're having a press conference today. I think that's also going to take an immense amount of community pressure. Fortunately, a lot of people who were in community with folks on this call have received funding from Dogwood. And so I think an ask from us is to have conversations with people that we know who have received funding and ask them to make specific requests because they're in a deeper relationship with Dogwood. And so if you're on this call and you know people who have received funding from Dogwood, I think the ask would be, hey, as a community member who's receiving money from this organization that has millions of dollars, can you send these requests to them? Amy, do you have any information of where if that press conference will be live streamed for people?
I don't think so, but I'm gonna poke around here and see if I can find out anything. I just saw it on. I'm sorry, I just saw it on Twitter this morning, so I'll see if I can find out more.
Are there any other questions?
Mari asked a question of me in the chat about the People's Demand Agenda, which is an agenda that we've seen both at the federal and state level to try and make our economic priorities in this time focused on the needs of our people. There's a hashtag People's Bailout, and then there's been some work from advocacy organizations as well as from a number of members of Congress. And here's the 5 priorities that they have as part of this. Number 1, health is the top priority for all people with no exceptions. Number 2, economic relief must be provided directly to the people. Number 3, rescue workers and communities, not corporate executives. Number 4, make a down payment or a regenerative economy while preventing future crises. And 5, protect our democratic process while protecting each other. And what I like about this agenda is that it sets out a clear set of standards to try and meet. And we saw, for instance, as the US Senate negotiated the bill, that the Democrats held out on some provisions in the bill that would get the final agreement closer to these 5 points. I think both in the federal Congress and in North Carolina, there's going to be negotiations towards the middle on anything that happens with these. But I will say among my colleagues, the Democrats that are working currently on coronavirus response in North Carolina, we have people who are focusing on each of those 5 items. And I'll paste a link that has these a little bit about this agenda into the chat box so folks can see it.
And we also have a link going from the North Carolina, this may be the same, North Carolina United for Survival. I put a link up there that has a list of demands, and Marisol also has them listed out. So the suggestion that I've seen is that list of demands, we should contact the governor. And so that's on the slide about contacting Governor Cooper. And a lot of these, and I'm hearing this generally, is when we talk about access to paid family medical leave, it's making that available now and in perpetuity.
I'm very proud to be the primary sponsor of our paid family medical leave bill from last year, the first time North Carolina ever had a paid family medical leave bill filed. We do it through a shared insurance pool that would be very efficient and make sure that every working person in the state had an opportunity for that forevermore, which would be wonderful.
was just.
I will say,
Okay.
I will say that I just want to lift up, I won't run down the entire list, but what we're seeing in these times is that folks are naming that we need to move quickly to financially support our people. And I will say that while not a government entity, there are several foundations specific to Western North Carolina that are releasing funding to collectives and grassroots folks on the ground to support people during this time who cannot work. And so there are some smaller collectives that have been able to secure funding to pay people for however amount of time they will not be working. And so just wanted to lift that up. I know it is not a government entity, but we are seeing a lot of individuals and a lot of foundations really stepping up and being somewhat of the bridge and doing the work that we're waiting on some of our local municipalities to do.
So I have a question. One of the things that I have been learning about is the way that these moments of crisis and pandemic are often used to push through really heinous type of policy and legislation. And so here locally, I think that we have concerns about things like the TDA and how they're going to be channeling funding and money for hotels. And so can you talk to us a little bit as we are organizing on the ground? Where do you see some of the red flags for us to plant? Because there is the part of policy work that is trying to enact positive, proactive legislation, of course, but there's a large part of our policy advocacy work that is about killing bills. So are there any things that you would flag for us that we should be trying to block and stop from happening?
I mean, at the state level, I would say we've already seen very regressive people policy recommendations coming from the North Carolina Chamber of Commerce and the John Locke Foundation. I think if you track what the John Locke Foundation is recommending, that's probably the place where you'll see the genesis of most bad ideas. The number one recommendation they sent us earlier in this week was to suspend North Carolina's anti-gouging law, which just seemed insane to me. I think that what's likely to happen in the legislature is that we're probably going to have a special session in a couple weeks that is going to be focused on some pre-negotiated disaster relief efforts, but probably not a lot of the bad stuff you would worry about. And then we'll come back for our short session the end of April, or it might get pushed into the middle of May. And that's where we would see a lot of those really bad proposals being pushed. And it's type of thing where I think you really have to work through advocacy organizations that have folks that are professionally tracking what's going on in the legislature. Because if you're following it in the news, you often only hear about it after it's done. Whereas the advocacy organizations are much better at kind of keeping up with stuff day to day and keeping folks posted on what's happening through email, letting you know when you need to speak up, et cetera.
And
I think on a local, I think on a local level, we need to be paying close attention to the compromises that are going to be happening during this time. I think that we're going to be needing to pay close attention to the compromises that we're going to make around the TDA funding because we're in such a crisis. I think that the general public just wants some relief. Right. And so I definitely foresee us making some compromises with the TDA funding just to get a little bit of the nugget that we're asking for. I think we're also going to need to be looking out for things in our community around affordable housing, because what's going to come up is, well, if everybody had housing that was affordable, we wouldn't necessarily be having the conversation about people who don't have a shelter. And so we're going to see compromises being made on affordable housing that actually isn't affordable, but because it says it's affordable, we're going to be like, oh wow, we're going to push through some affordable housing. And so I think in Asheville, in Buncombe County, I want us to be looking at the TDA anything that has the name affordable housing that we see coming out and really at this point the next few months. And I also think we need to keep our eyes on ICE, and we need to be putting having some really hard conversations with the Buncombe County Sheriff and our new police chief around how they actually do plan on not having a relationship with ICE and what that actually means, because it's more than just not having a 287G agreement. And so we know that is an organization that profits off of people suffering. And I think we're in a time where we're seeing where they could possibly use this to benefit them. And so I would say those are the three things or arenas that we really need to be looking at in the next few weeks, if not months, here in Asheville.
And to totally back you up on all of those things, I think one of the things that we can do is ask that plans be made available before they're put in place, and that public comment be made available immediately before it's put in place. Because if we don't know what the plan is, then we won't be able to catch it. Now, I know Graig was talking about advocacy groups, but sometimes these decisions are made really fast. So, for example, if the APD or Buncombe County Sheriff's Office do have a plan, then it needs to be made available to the public. And I think that's one of the requests that we can make together for all the people, especially because we know so many folks won't be able to be paying attention if they're at work in a service that's considered emergency service or a necessity service.
I have a question. Hi, my name is Chloe. My question is that all of the governmental service funding that seems to be potentially going through is going through next month. And I'm wondering what y'all have heard about the issues people are having with all the rent and other bills that are coming up on April 1st. And so I'm wondering what y'all are hearing assistance-wise for that, or also grassroots movement organizing wise locally.
Thank you, Chloe. I will say that going back to the One Buncombe Fund, it is our understanding from the City Council meeting last night that we can anticipate that personal applications for relief funding, those application processes would be available as soon as this week. And we also know that Buncombe County Courthouse isn't accepting any cases for, say, evictions. So there is a pause moment in between those two. What is not clear to me at this time is if folks should or should not pay their rent for April 1st. So this is something that we'll all have to pay attention to each other and share information moving forward, because that answer is not clear to me. Does anyone else have something to offer?
So we know that the North Carolina court system has stopped eviction proceedings, but that eviction orders can still be enforced. So if you don't want an eviction order, then you probably should try to pay your rent by April 1st. If you can't pay your rent by April 1st, then you are not going to get kicked out of your house during the current crisis. And it would require, there's been people who have asked for a suspension of rent and mortgage payments. That would require an act of the legislature, and that has not been part of the discussions on relief efforts to my knowledge so far.
So that sounds like something that we could send to the full legislature. Would that be your advisement, Graig?
You absolutely can. And I think it's aligned with the agenda that is in the comments. I think that they have called for that in the United for Survival and Beyond agenda. But I don't think that we got majority Republican rule, and I don't think that the Economic Response Committee has, I don't know what they've put on the table yet, but that has not been something that I have heard in any of the media coverage of what the Republican leadership is talking about.
So I have a follow-up question then. You know, given the way that this is unmasking what's happening in our, you know, democracy, what do you all suggest in terms of what the implications are for this moment in terms of elections and election protection, and how is it that we mobilize in quarantine to try to get conservative folks who are defending capitalism over their grandmothers out of office?
That's a great question. I mean, we are going to push for some changes to the election process this year that we will probably argue are good for public health reasons. So for instance, increasing the accessibility of vote by mail. We've had a strong agenda the last few years on making it easier to vote and reducing gerrymandering and reducing the influence of money in politics. So, I mean, those are all things that I think we'll continue to ask for. I think that the changes to the voting is the one that's most likely to happen during this time period. The elections this year obviously will be of critical importance, and every campaign right now is trying to figure out how to reconfigure what does election organizing look like in an age of social distancing, and you know, everybody's trying to figure out how can we switch over from knocking on doors to making phone calls, et cetera. If you have interest in making a difference in this year's elections, then I would encourage you to volunteer just as you always would, but work with the campaigns to figure out the way to do it the best under these new rules. But Kim and Nicole are running, so maybe you all have specific requests.
Well, I will say that when Nicole reminds me all the time that the systems that harm us aren't going to heal us, that sticks with me. And that we also know that representation matters. So I've been thinking a lot about what it means to just keep doing the work and be doing the work that the people require and that love requires. And that's not going to be easy, but I think the things that folks are doing right now will help. I appreciate, Greg, what you're doing at the state level, but I know that we're gonna have to put pressure on people where it matters. So it means for me not excluding someone that I know may or may not agree with me, but reaching out to them anyway and making that case for the grandmothers, not for people with deep pockets.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting time. I mean, I'm thinking specifically of and I could be wrong, so if I am, forgive me, charge it to my head, not my heart, but I think it's Louisiana that had to move. You know, like we're seeing states and cities have to move their elections. And this is, I'm sitting grappling with what this means when the people who are in charge really have known about this virus since the end of last year, and what it means to not make a mandate around Christmas when people are spending so much money, billions of dollars. And so I'm grappling with, what does it look like to hold people accountable who should have been making mandates back in December? Because had that have happened, I don't think elections would have been moved. And so, and for me, it's also looking at what a person is doing over a person's political party. Because right now, really, we've been in a critical moment for several years now around believing that anyone who calls themselves a progressive is actually willing to do progressive things for our community. And so when I'm thinking about the upcoming elections, I'm thinking about really asking, what were the people doing on the ground? What was the work that people were actually putting in? And all of this is still unraveling. I mean, I went to the Board of Elections 2 days ago, and they had a drop box and told me that everyone needs to drop any information in the drop box. And if you need to talk to someone, you have to call. And so I want to say I'm worried isn't the word. I really can't describe it, but I will say that in the coming months, we need to have folks on the ground organizing around voter rights, organizing about what will it mean to get people to the polls if we're still dealing with shelter in place post-summer. I also think this is a moment where the personal is political, and we have people in office who are showing us that the things we've been asking for many years can actually happen. And so I think this is also a moment to clock that and name we actually can have fair, free transit. We actually can have living wage jobs. And so while we're in the midst of this, I don't want us to forget about the long-term goal, about what happens when this is over, because it will be over at some point. We don't know when that point is. And so I want us to also be holding that. What do we need to do post what is happening, and how are we clocking the things that we have been demanding for years that are actually happening in this moment? And so, yeah, holding all of those things, as many of you are as well.
And I've been thinking a lot about the Sunrise request for a Green New Deal for the city, for the county, for the state, and for our country. The importance, as Nicole, as you've said, about a race and class analysis, because that's what we're seeing right now. As we have to transition our systems that were broken by design, who's the most vulnerable, who's at risk? So I think this is a great opportunity to stay on task about keep elevating the things that we need as we go through this transition and moving forward.
I have a question on this note about protecting democracy and voting. So if we're like looking to do advocacy work to expand like vote by mail and online voter registration, and just like generally making it actually feasible for people to vote, would you suggest like putting that pressure on the county, or do they not really have the ability to change those things? Is that more like a state level?
That's all state level stuff. So definitely talk to your local legislative delegation and coordinate with the advocacy organizations that are going to be working on those things.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
So the first advocacy group I think of is Democracy NC. Do you think of any others right now, Graig?
I think that's probably the best organized one on this issue. Common Cause has done some good stuff on some democracy reforms. There's one more that I'm trying to remember, but I can't think of what it's called. But I think Democracy NC is a great place to start.
Yeah, Marisol's saying that too.
It's 11, and so I think we should probably wrap up. Any closing comments y'all want to make? Nicole, anything you want to share to close?
Yeah, so I put this, when we talked about holding this space, I wanted to also create a space of transparency. And so something that I've been holding for a very long time is that the system that harms us won't be the system that heals us. As someone who is running for office, I'm very clear that I'm not a politician. I'm someone who is on assignment. And I want us to be clear that in these times when we are desperate and when we are hurting and when we are grieving, we are going to see local government act in a way that we've been asking them to act for a long time when we're not under a pandemic, right? And this is not the time to give up the need for mutual aid and to give up the need for building deep community relationships. This is the time to continue to understand why mutual aid and building deep relationships and community is actually important, because community, that's what heals us. And so I really want to name that. We're in a very critical time, and I think we should be appreciating our officials who are taking bold steps and who are supporting community. And we need to also not allow that to create any fog on the fact that we still, even without COVID-19, we still have a system that is harming us and killing our people. And so I want to make that very clear in that moment, not to forget that, and to really push people to really figure out what building deep relationships in community looks like. Check on your neighbor. I don't care if you don't know who your neighbor is. Send them a Facebook message. If you're on Facebook, just take a walk in your neighborhood and really kind of get to know your neighborhood a little bit. I'm also pushing people to create safety plans with people that you trust during this time. And just remember that community keeps us safe. Community brings healing. And let's put pressure on elected officials. Let's have them do what they're supposed to do. And also let's remember that even our favorite person who is an elected official is still working in a system that wasn't meant to allow us to survive. And so I want to keep that in the forefront and just name that anyone on this call who has been like throwing down with mutual aid and supporting your neighbors, like I appreciate you. And I'm thankful that this work is being done in Asheville and lifting up the fact that over the past couple weeks, we've seen that we actually do have what we need. And so I'm grateful for all of y'all on this call and everything that y'all have been doing during this time for our neighbors.
Kim, do you want to say anything?
I think that's a great closing statement. I agree.
Awesome. I thank everybody for tuning in. I do a nightly update on Facebook Live on my page, which is just Graig Meyer, my name, Graigmeyer. And you can tune in there if you have more questions any night. Thanks to Marisol for putting this all together. If you want to reward Mari for doing this great work to organize folks in Western North Carolina, you can Venmo her a tip at the Venmo address that is listed on the screen right now. Mari, is there anything you want to say to close us out?
Well, I'm just incredibly grateful that all of you took the time out of the work that you're doing in community to spend some time with us and talk to us about what's going on. It is critical, complicated, paradoxical work when we're trying to work within a system that was designed to harm so many of us, and yet is a system where so many of the resources that we need for healing are being held. So I hope that all of us can find ways to navigate those paradoxes and get engaged, get involved, in not only the advocacy that's needed to support leaders like we've had on the call today, but also to be able to be organizing on the ground through our mutual aid efforts, to be supporting the leaders that are emerging and have always been present as our safety nets in our communities and neighborhoods. And this reward, Marisol, just to clarify, please send, if you are able to offer any donations, these are free webinar series, but we are highlighting different funds. And so the fund that I'm highlighting would go towards mutual aid efforts in the Emma neighborhood, which is just outside of Asheville city limits. And it's where a lot of our Latinx and immigrant community members are living, who are also most often going to be outside of all of these unemployment benefits, these policy protections, are most vulnerable at the checkpoints, on these roadblocks, encounters with police on the way to the grocery store. All of these are going to be hotspot moments of contact for our communities. So creating mutual aid efforts in those areas is going to be not just crucial to making sure that people eat, but also crucial to making sure that people don't get swept up in detention and deportation in the middle of this pandemic. So please consider supporting. Again, thank you so much, Graig, Kim, Nicole, everybody for joining this morning on this call. Please stay safe, stay connected, and stay well in all the ways.
Thanks,
This
everybody.
recording will be made available on Facebook as well as the resource page. So thank you so much, everybody, and have a good rest of your day.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.